Well, good evening. Lots of things to go over and talk about this evening. But looks like, so Chair Bernard will not be joining us this evening. He left for a vacation, and so you've got to deal with me, I guess, this evening. So I'll make it as entertaining as possible for a Thursday before a holiday. We can start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Did we do that the last Zoom meeting? Did I miss that?
We did it the last time, and it's a lot of fun.
And there's the flag. Thank you, Trent.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we will begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. Great job. All right.
That's pretty good, a flag and everything.
I know. Trent is, each meeting he gets better and better. I love it. And this time he's at the office instead of at home.
That's right.
Okay. Housekeeping. Approval of the June 4th, 2020 minutes.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Axelrod. And I'm sorry, was that you, Martin?
No,
Brett.
but I will.
Brett. All right. Mr. Sherman, thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions about the minutes? All right. Show of hands in front of your faces on the screen. All those in favor? All those opposed? It passes. Thank you. Housekeeping number 2 item, July meeting discussion. Trent, I'll let you take us through that.
Thanks so much. So today's meeting is really a makeup session, if you will, from what would have normally occurred at the C4 retreat. May it rest in peace for 2020. So this is a chance for this group to look ahead and really dive into what you want to have brought back to you for this next year. I know the agenda says from July 2020 to June 2020. This is not about the last 2 days. This is about the next 12 months. For those who can appreciate a joke and a typo. So really what we're going to do is go through this list of things within our packet here, and I have them pulled up. If it's easier to look at it on a screen share, that might work, but I think it'll be easier to do it in our holiday square situation, our Birdie Brunch squares, for tracking the communication side of it. But ideally, as we go through each of these, we can talk a little bit about, or you're welcome to talk about your personal feelings or the policies about it, or your city's feelings about it, or your jurisdiction's group. But what's going to help me and what's going to help staff over the next 12 months is really talking about what your goals are for these discussions, so that we can help bring these back to you in a timely way, and with guests or with information that will help you move these policies forward. And so that's really just my foundation for y'all walking into this meeting today. It really is sort of a planning session. It's a normal C4 meeting, but because it's this way, I would encourage you to be as formal or as informal as you want to be, just because this is really mostly about planning and not about setting policy. How can I help you, move into the next 12 months? And that's it.
I'm sorry.
Keith, you have a question, Keith?
Well, no, I had a comment. It's going to be kind of tough to talk about this and plan when we have no idea when COVID's going to be over.
I think that's a really good point. We don't know when COVID's going to be over. I think a lot of these topics are still evergreen topics for us. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about 205. People are still traveling to and from work, and when COVID is over, that'll still be an issue. We'll talk about Get Moving 2020. That's going to be on the ballot in November, whether COVID is here or not. The climate action plan that the county's moving forward, we've talked about that. That'll still be around. The 21 legislative session, housing. These are, I think, evergreen topics. And yes, I think you have a good point. These things might look different, or their timeline could look different because of COVID, but I don't think they're going away. And so we could still, this group could still meet in that direction. I see your hand, Councilor Dunsmuir.
Just make sure. Oh, you want me to talk now?
Yes.
Yes.
So when it comes to housing, the last couple of years have been focused solely on how we can help residents acquire housing and stay in housing and all of that. But with the COVID pandemic, I actually want to see some conversation happening at the county level focused around landlords, because right now landlords are actually being greatly affected by COVID, especially when we look at now the extension of the eviction moratorium. Not only are we going to have residents that are greatly affected by that, but we're going to have landlords that are greatly affected by it too. And I just want to know that there's going to be some conversation moving forward at the county level that's going to give them some level of protections as well as the residents.
Thanks for that comment. I know that the county has talked about landlords as part of the, rent moratoriums for commercial and residential. So that is a topic here in the county, and I don't see our housing folks on for staff support, but it's on my notes now, and so we'll move it forward. Councilor Morrison, and then Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you. This probably is a question more for Commissioner Savas. Do we know where we stand on the vehicle registration fee? I understood there was a recall. If I understood correctly, there was trying to get a ballot initiative to rescind that voter registration fee. Do you know anything about that, Commissioner?
I think that failed. I haven't heard anything about that. So I think that's dead in the water at this point. But I believe that from what I heard, I mean, it could be resurrected anytime in the future.
Oh.
So, I wouldn't necessarily think that because it's dead now, it won't be dead. I mean, it may come back to life in the future. I did raise my hand quickly to just address Katie's thing about the housing and landlords. The county commissioners recognize those impacts. If the eviction thing was going to be extended, that there would be impacts to the landlords and the property owners. So we included that in our letter to the governor and the legislature. And of course, the legislature acted, but they didn't act on behalf of the landlords. They only acted on behalf of the renters. So, I spoke to one property owner a couple nights ago, and it was a pretty severe impact that he was experiencing. So there's some that are not impacted very much at all. Some are. So I think it's a range, but I think we got to realize that can't sustain. And there are impacts. So. Well, I don't know how the legislature is going to address that, but we tried, but that doesn't mean we stopped trying, right? So I would just reach out to your legislators and see what kind of feedback you get from them. And then the next cycle, there's going to be another short session. We don't know yet when, Trent, right? Another abbreviated session?
Correct. The date is not out yet. We suspect it'll be mostly about budgets, state budgets in particular.
And then if it's not in that short session or that abbreviated session, it'll be in the next session in January, February, where it'll come up. And hopefully it'll be out of the woods by then, but we don't know that either.
Thank you, Commissioner. Maybe you and I can talk or meet individually, because I manage departments. That's what I've been doing for like the last decade. So I'd love to talk to you more, actually, privately. Thank you.
Sure.
So my final comment is just the Tualatin staff reviewed this list, and it pretty much aligns with a lot of our goals for not only for our city. So I think it's on the right path, and a lot of this is obviously going to happen fairly fast. I know I don't know, Mayor Axelrod, when you're going to bring it up, but I've seen a letter that he authored that was, by the way, very well written. Enjoyed reading it, that you're attempting to get some more endorsements on for the 205. And I think that's, something that we clearly want. My understanding is that's something we want to work on. And so I think just a lot of positive things here to work on.
So I have next Mayor Hodson, Mayor Axelrod, and then Ed Cronky.
Thanks, Trent. I was just going to say, since we've kind of got this list in front of us, I thought, if everybody, we could, looking at the list, I think we should maybe just take these maybe one by one and find out, okay, are these, these topics we're talking about and adding into the agenda for the rest of the year or not? instead of just kind of looking at it as a holistic, you know, all as one slate, take it all or leave it all. I thought we could just start at the top and work our way down in terms of just support, non-support, hear more, not hear more. You know, there's 17 of us, 18 of us here, you know, so it looks like we're setting the agenda for the next couple of months, which, you know, it's a participatory government. So if you show up, you get to participate. If you don't, then so be it. But I will let the other people speak that have their hands up, and then maybe we just start at the top and go through it. So I think Mayor Axelrod and then Mr. Gronke.
Thank you. Well, since on top of the list is I-205, we might as well talk about it. West Lynn, we had prepared a letter that was principally directed at kind of getting city's support and reemphasizing and getting in front of DeFazio and others around the House bill that's moving through, which was apparently passed Wednesday out of the House. Will go into the Senate, and then we'll go into some committees for work. But there's I-205 obviously has been an important project for C4 as well. There's been some developments, as you probably know, with the I-5 Rose Quarter project recently in the news this last week that are very significant and in our favor. You know, the Albina Vision Trust, that racial justice group, has backed out of its support. Following that, Mayor Wheeler, Commissioner Udaley, who has the Portland Business or the Transportation group for the city, Multnomah County representatives on that are all backing out of the I-5 Rose Quarter project, which, as you know, if you go all the way back to 2017, when the original 2017 transportation package was put together, I-205 was always envisioned as a project that was supposed to be in front of the Rose Quarter I-5 project anyway. So I think it's ripe now for us to really push hard for 205 elevating itself to the top major freeway, whatever we want to call it, interstate roadway sort of project. There's a few things in the letter. I was circulated to several cities about a week ago. It was brought up yesterday briefly at our county chair's mayor's meeting, suggested we talk about it a little tonight. And then we got some feedback kind of from the county that maybe it's more of a city's focus for this letter, and it still might be. So I've reached out to several cities, only directly heard, well, with a positive so far from Tualatin, Happy Valley, I think Lake Oswego and Gladstone. Milwaukee is very interested if the project is going to have the rapid bus on the shoulder. And so we're trying to figure out right now just where that is in the design. My understanding is it's accounted for in the design, but I thought it was accounted for in the design, but not in the costs. But there may be even elements of the design that are accounted for. So we're kind of digging into that, and we might add a sentence or two about that and see if we can't, Milwaukee could, then sign it. Haven't yet heard from Wilsonville or Oregon City. So we're kind of fine tuning the letter. It gets circulated around to the cities as soon as we have a couple more additions. But I think it is one that's, high priority for all of us. Not only for our cities, but I think for C4 for a major transportation infrastructure project.
Great. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Ed, you still have something you want to add there, sir?
Yes, I haven't heard any mention at all of racial equity. There's been, you can't ignore the issue. It keeps coming up every night. Does this group have any intention of addressing the racial equity issue in the county during the balance of this year? And I think it's going to have to be done probably more by zoning than any other approach I can think of.
Thank you, Ed. I appreciate that. And when you talk about, can you expand a little bit for me more on the racial equity piece? And are you talking about from a housing perspective, from a development perspective, all the above?
Well, I've been thinking and talking about this a great deal during the last month or two. And it occurs to me that I think we have to address the fact that in this county, with our present zoning laws and our approach to zoning, we are really making it impossible for a family of less than median income to own a house in the county. And that's the way it is. That's what the market has done. And I think it's time we begin addressing this issue, or you begin addressing this issue.
Great. Thank you, Ed. I've written that down as a potential piece to add to this list for us to talk about. Commissioner Savas, and then
Councilor Hazy would be next.
oh, sorry.
Well,
Commissioner
Savas, and then Councilor Hazy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to address, just kind of give you maybe a little bit different perspective on the Rose Quarter project, responding to Mayor Axelrod's raising up the I-205. We have tried at the county level a couple times to say, hey, you're not making much traction on that I-5 thing. Let's just maybe use some of that money and get the I-5 or the I-205 project started. And then by the time you guys sort that all out, then, whatever revenues or monies that you were going to build 205 with, you can shift those over and pay back the piggy bank there for Rose Quarter. Well, that we floated that even just a few weeks ago with ODOT staff. And in the article today that you read about Portland and what the mayor was referring to, I think what's really happening there, and Brian, Mayor Hodson knows a little bit about this at the R1 Act. The price for that project's ballooning, and they want more out of it. They want lids over it. They want to build real estate up on top of it. And I look at it the opposite way. I think it's going to hurt us because they're gonna build it. It's going to happen. It's just going to cost a heck of a lot more. And then the question is, where's the money come from? And my guess is that it's probably going to come from us. And when I say us, that means all of us. So I think if anything, it might be more of a detriment than anything else. But because it's legislative directed, my guess is it's going to happen. Maybe not as soon as we thought it was going to happen. It's just going to cost a heck of a lot more. They're going to hold out until they get everything that they want. And I guess we're going to have to get to the bottom of, and I do some history to figure out, is this really ODOT's problem? I mean, this issue between the Albina group and the city of Portland, it seemed, I thought, I could be completely mistaken, but I thought it was an issue between the city of Portland and issues about development and urban renewal and redlining and all those things that have a lot of historic context, kind of segueing into what Ed Grumpy was talking about to some degree. And that is some of the unfair housing policies that have impacted low-income populations more than anyone, which are predominantly in Portland, people of color, and less so in Clackamas County, but we still have those impacts. But I just want to give you that perspective that I think it's going to hurt us more than it will help us. I'll stop there.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
So Councilor Heisey was next, and then I have Mayor Knapp and then Mayor Axelrod following. And what I have so far for this topic is to capture the momentum and understand the impacts of the loss of support in the Rose Quarter right now, but also talk a little bit about or understand better the bus on shoulder elements of this project.
Yeah, and I was actually going to respond to Ed's comment. I do see that on this list under administrative, we do have equity lens on C4 positions for transportation and land use, and certainly housing is a land use category. So I assume it's already on the list. So I'll save my comments. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll add that, transportation and land use are bylaw topics of C4 and housing's captured in there. And so the conversation about equity in a lot of different ways for this topic, as Mr. Gronke said, has come up in a lot of different venues. It was also recommended from a former C4 member, which was Councilor Drake, when he saw the agenda as the alternate. So very good feedback. I have it here under the administrative component of, how does this group want to approach these conversations within the policy setting? And then how that goes back to your jurisdictions is, I think, a little bit more complicated, just because there are so many different individuals from so many different jurisdictions. But if you wanted to focus it on what you do here at C4, that would be a little bit more direct, and we could certainly bring in folks to help us and guide us in those conversations and how we think about that here. So I have those notes included.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Knapp and then Mayor Axelrod.
Thank you. I'm a little frustrated here because we're kind of bouncing all over the place, and it doesn't seem like we're focusing on any one thing to get it done before we go on to the next thing, which means we'll run out of time on the whole meeting and won't have covered everything. So I would like to see us kind of take them in order that I heard Trent suggest to start with, and see what are the components of each of these items that C4 is interested in having discussion on. That would bring us back to the I-205 at this point. The comments that Mr. Savas has just made, I think, are accurate. I think that the turmoil occurring around the Rose Quarter is going to both fall out in terms of increased cost and increased delay. And instead of moving I-205 in front of that, it will push us further back behind it, both in terms of funding and in terms of timetable. It seems to me that until and unless the city of Portland and Metro decide that they're going to walk away from it, that you're never going to be able to go to the legislature and convince them to reprioritize. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So I think they're digging in deeper on what they're going to need to do. The governor even came out and said, unless the Black Lives group is in support, that they were not going to move it forward. Well, that sounds like a whole lot of extended dialogue to me. Not that it shouldn't be done, but the question is it appropriate to put everything else on hold until it's done throughout the region? And, I think that's going to be difficult. So it seems to me what C4 can do is try to have staff maintain a close watch and sort of try to follow the intelligence on what's happening and what the direction is, and whether any other avenues open up to potentially reprioritize either the timetable or the funding in a way that would help the 205 move up on the priority list. That's a tough call. I don't think Clackamas County is really in an influential position as to what happens in Rose Quarter. So that's kind of how that topic feels to me. You might relate this discussion to the second topic listed on tolling, because I think that there's a separate push going on. There's actually 3 different tolling projects moving forward, but I won't go into that right this minute.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Mayor Axelrod.
Well, first off, I want to acknowledge Ed Gronke's comments, which I fully agree, and I did see the equity lens there. And I think to address that too, I think we should give an eye toward everything we do with an equity lens toward everything we do here moving forward, and make sure that we're tracking that. But I understand what Savas has said and what Mayor Knapp has sort of backed in terms of the focus for Portland and some others, but we're going to have to move this project. We cannot wait for the Rose Quarter project to dink around for another 3, 5, 6 years of evaluation. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's going to be a very expensive project. We need to get to the legislature. I think we need to go at this very aggressively and get legislative movement, pressure with Portland, sit down with them, sit down with Metro, and get them to understand that the 205 project needs to move forward. I think we just need to go at it real hard. I don't think we sit and wait and just see when they might pay attention to Clackamas County. I suggest we have a very aggressive approach working with our legislature and try and get it reprioritized. I really do. We can't go for another 3, 4, 5 years just sitting around waiting for the Rose Quarter project before we even like start to think or fund for this project, which is essentially shovel ready. Makes no sense at all. And I don't think it's defensible for the Portland community to hold it up. I don't think it's defensible at the legislature. So I kind of disagree with that kind of attitude toward it. I think we should go at it really strong. I may not be around to battle for it next year, but I sure hope it gets battled for.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Heisey, and then I have a question for the group.
So I know that this project is important to this group. Every time we talk about it, it sucks up at least a half hour of our time. And I find that frustrating because we have a lot of work we could be doing and a lot of conversations we could have. There are some fundamentally different viewpoints on this, and I don't see them getting resolved. Every time we talk about it, those same two viewpoints come up. Yes, we can influence it and we need to push hard. No, we can't influence it and we're kind of stuck. So if there's a way we can move this conversation to a subgroup that is really focused on I-205, I would love to explore that option. Or if we can put better guardrails on the conversation and really say, okay, we're going to spend X amount of time on this and then we're going to move on. I would love that. It is critical, but we don't get anywhere when we talk about it in this format, as far as I can tell.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So my question for the group is, in terms of the I-205 improvements and widening project, is this a high priority item, a mid-level priority, or a low-level priority? So those of you that think it's a high-level priority, can you shake heads or put up your hands so that I know? Okay. Those of you that think it's a more of a mid-level, like medium, okay. Low-level, like it'll be what it'll be. Okay.
That's very helpful to me, and I think that Councilor Heisey's comments can really help Chris Lyons and me as we think about this and taking it back to the executive committee. We do have a legislative strategy at the county around 205. Clarity around C4's role in this topic might help us hone in some of the conversation here, and I have that note to help us move forward.
Councilor Dunsmuir.
Thank you. I was just listening to all of you talk, and I have a question for the group. Have we yet thrown any support behind any tolling at all for this project yet?
So, okay, so thank you for segueing into the next topic. I appreciate that very much.
Okay. Well, and Mayor Knapp has already brought it up once, and when we talk about moving forward in this conversation, I don't think that just trying to push and push and push is going to be helpful when continuing this conversation. I think that this group might need to, because it sounds like the tolling is going to happen anyways. I think what might have to happen is that we'll have to throw our support behind one in order to get our project pushed forward ahead of everything else. A compromise. I mean, that if that's what it takes, maybe compromise is what we need to start talking about instead of just continuing to push.
So the last ACT meeting, I believe, and those of you that were there, Commissioner Savas and I believe Councilor Koloff was part of that conversation, was the tolling piece has now taken a turn, and Trent, I was not at the recent tolling meeting, or I guess I'll be at the next one, that we have a small subgroup of the cities that right there on 205 that the tolling will impact, that the conversation has shifted from the tolling funds to be, have nothing to do with the 205 project and everything to do with dealing with mitigation off of 205 when they do implement tolling.
Thanks.
So
I can provide a little context to that and maybe just help us launch into this question about what you would like to have brought back to us here. similar to what Councilor Heisey was describing, there is a separate committee on tolling around the 205. It's specifically to look at policies around the diversion impact because of the project. And so it includes just a very few subset of this group here, cities that are directly adjacent to and a couple that are not to the I-205 tolling project. And yeah, for some context, ODOT has treated the I-205 widening project and the tolling project as same but different. The project teams are not necessarily working together, but they're not talking to each other either. So that doesn't make it any easier. The goal of that tolling policy diversion group is to come up with some policy recommendations and then come back to this group to sort of affirm those recommendations, so that this group can then go out and advocate and have a local voice on that particular topic, separate from, you know, the I-205 widening project, which, you know, everyone in here I think supports. That's not necessarily the question, but back to Councilor Dunsmuir's point, it's complicated, and there are a lot of different feelings about tolling, not just with individuals, but also in councils, including our own commission. It's, you know, it's not necessarily as obvious, and so we've made a couple of statements in the past, but enough things have changed that, you know, there's probably an opportunity to revisit that in the future, even in our own commission. So for tolling, you know, we've had a couple times where Lucinda Broussard from ODOT has now come to the C4 meeting back in March, I think, and then also to the C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting in May. And so a couple visits from that office. And now this small group is meeting, and they will come back to us in the future with some recommendations. Right now, the NEPA data comment period is open through the middle of August. It might go a little bit later. And that tolling group is going to get together at the end of this month to, you know, propose some policy direction for how people from this group can then make comments. And so I'll leave it there. There's a lot happening, but I think for this group in particular, there's an opportunity to bring that back. What would help me as staff is to know, do you want to keep these topics combined or keep them separate as it's appropriate? And then I have Commissioner Savas and then Martin Myers as hands up in order.
I put my hand down. What I was going to say, just so everyone knows, and Trent knows this quite well, is that Clackamas County, we have not taken our foot off the gas. We're keeping the pressure on to fund 205. So we're not just sitting on our laurels. We are pushing hard, and every opportunity we have, we're lobbying. So rest assured, we have not taken our foot off the gas on that one.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Myers.
Yeah, thank you. I think the idea of a subcommittee for diversion in 205 widening is a good idea. I like the idea, but I also would like to suggest that the rural and unincorporated areas be at least some part of that, and not just responding to a set of recommendations coming from the subcommittee. We're going to suffer as bad or worse. It's going to be a longer detour, but if you do a Google from Gresham to Oregon City, coming through Redland, which is my area, is minutes away from being the preferred route. And anybody who's going to look at tolling is going to look at 213. It's going to look at these other secondary roads. So I don't know exactly how that works. I don't want to put myself someplace where I'm not particularly welcome or what, but I think the unincorporated and rural areas need to be part of that discussion. Thanks.
So thanks, Martin. I appreciate that, and I agree with all the comments around both of these pieces. So to Trent's comment about, you know, are these two items together? Do we treat them separately? Is it bring them together whenever they seem to fit? Right now, it seems like they're two separate pieces. We have 205 widening project, and tolling is taking its own way of life about itself right now, with its own group and that piece. I think that if we keep it as that micro or subcommittee group that's meeting from the tolling perspective and keep bringing those things back, and then as those of us that are on the act here pieces as well can incorporate that and bring those back as appropriate and make them maybe more you know, updates as we move through this. I think that can be a way that we can keep the communication in this group in the know on this, but also not maybe bog down other topics that we might be needing to talk about. And as those topics come up, we will deal with it. Is the tolling piece, is that a high priority or a hot topic conversation that everybody wants to be in the tune with? I'm with Mayor Axelrod. I know that Canby 99E will get actually totally hammered if people can get off the freeway and go 99 and bypass toll gates. So for me, I'm definitely looking at being a part of those meetings and bringing back as much as we can to this group to take positions on or kick around ideas. So, so it seems like maybe that's more of it's hot topic, but bring it back to the group as need be as the conversation goes. Am I seeing that as Mayor Axelrod and then Mayor Knapp?
Yeah, just a quick comment. There's a couple of cities right along there too that I know it's high priority or has been in the past that don't seem to be here tonight. Oregon City and Gladstone represented from what I'm seeing on the picture. And so that's just to be considered.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Mayor Knapp?
Yeah, don't want to be a broken record, but here again, I'm not sure we're in the driver's seat. We've got 3 different tolling studies that are actively underway at this point. You've got the city of Portland, you've got ODOT, and you've, who is the third one? the Metro study. So how those pieces interrelate or don't interrelate, is going to be dependent on those groups somewhat. And I think we need to be nimble, and we need to be paying attention, and we need to be aware of what's kind of who's driving the boat and how it's moving forward, and how actions in any of those 3 studies will appear to affect the 205 situation. So I don't know that you can divorce it completely from it, because I think it is related. But it's not at all clear to me that the construction of 205 is on anybody other than Clackamas County's agenda as needing to precede the tolling. So I would think that we have an assignment for staff there to try to keep their lines of communications open and bring it to us when there are developments that would appear relevant.
So noted.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Commissioner Savas and then Mayor Axelrod.
Yeah, I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to suggest that we take the tolling 1 notch down from the highest priority. And here's my reasoning as to why I think that. If you look at the timetable for the tolling work that ODOT's doing on I-205, just that one, it's several years out, even though it's underway currently, but it's a few years out. The timetable in which they show constructions beginning for 205, this is ODOT, is much sooner than that. It's by 2021, 22. Okay, that's the time frame that they have planned construction. Have not identified the funding, but that's when they think that to start. So we're hoping actually that this legislative session coming up in January, February, is when they'll actually address that. And basically have said they would come back and to address it. So that's how I would suggest we maybe put this down the tolling 1 notch down and put the construction widening at the highest priority.
All right. Thank you, sir. Mayor Axelrod.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. And I just want to make one point on the tolling. I think tolling is a great tool. One of the things I've been pushing ODOT, who's recently come to council and I think has presented to us recently, is this concept of we need to be looking at tolling from the entire freeway system in the Portland metro area, not just these little teeny segments. And it frustrates me to no end that they're not looking at a system-wide, very low toll for everywhere to remove this issue of diversion. And I think we ought to have that as a cornerstone of our strategy in influence and recommendation for a region-wide tolling on the metro freeways.
Oh, I see. Mayor Swigert had his hand up too, and I think I have a lot of direction on these two topics. But if there's more dialogue, I'm happy to take it.
I just wanted to say, I agree with Mayor Axelrod. How much money in tax dollars is lost from Oregonians moving to Vancouver and working in Portland? Seems to me they could make up a lot of money by tolling I-5 there also.
Okay. So I'm hearing from the group maybe that the tolling piece is a medium high priority that needs to be nimble and jump in and out of the limelight as need be as it relates to 205's development. Trent, does that seem fair?
Yes, that's what I have as well.
Okay. The Get Moving 2020 November measure, is that a high priority, medium level priority for us as a group, or a low level priority? I'm open for comments. Seeing none?
I'll just say that while the work is still underway at Metro, it's mostly baked. Most of the ingredients are in there. It's a mostly baked topic. They've visited C4 back in May for context and provided some background on how they reached a lot of their decisions. They are right now working with a lot of cities and counties and folks to get memorandums of understanding, if the measure were to pass, how to work together on some of the projects. But once Metro meets here in a little bit, and it's not too far away, they'll meet. It'll move to the ballot, and then there won't be a whole lot that this group can do except for individually as elected officials. But as a public body, we'll stop being able to work on it mostly because except for informational purposes, because it'll be on a measure.
Commissioner Savas, what's the BCC's position on
the measure?
Yeah.
Well, I've been trying to get more detail on some of the projects. And so on Tuesday, 2 days ago, Metro on the agenda, Metro's been asking for a letter of commitment, somewhat endorsing the measure and putting it on the ballot, but also a letter of commitment as far as some MOUs or IGAs or something to that effect. But the projects, as Trent said, are somewhat baked, but apparently not quite baked. But the way it's being presented is pretty vague, and there's a few things or discrepancies, I would call them, that kind of gave me a little bit of pause, and some language in the MOUs that is not quite either accurate or unexplained. So I talked a little bit with Councilor Lewis yesterday about it. We ran out of time in our discussion, but the decision then was, it was 4-1 vote on Tuesday to put it on not this Thursday, but next Thursday's agenda. So whatever day that is, July 7th or 9th or 8th. And the board will vote to send the MOU or to vote to approve the MOUs, I'm assuming. So the board's position is they're supportive of it. I'm not sure it's going to be unanimous.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Councilor Koloff?
So does anybody have any kind of inside information on whether it actually is going to be referred for the ballot? That isn't what you read in the press. You keep getting this rumbling that Metro is receiving bad vibes. Does anybody know whether there really is a chance that it would not go on the ballot?
Great question.
Just repeat what I said. I talked to Councilor Lewis yesterday. She seemed very confident it was going to be on the ballot. I too have heard, like a lot of you, that they haven't really decided where the revenue is going to come from, whether it's going to be a VRF or a business tax or what the funding mechanism is. I don't think they've settled on that, but she gave me no reason to think that it's not going to be on the ballot. She seemed pretty confident it would, if that helps.
So Trent, for this group on this particular item, are we anticipating Metro wanting to come back to us and get this group's whole support as a whole, or will they be wanting more just one-on-one endorsements or support from mayors and councilors individually?
Great question. I don't anticipate that Metro will want to come back and talk more about this project, especially once it's referred to the ballot. Mostly it was me asking. This has been a hot topic for this group for the last year and a half as it's evolved. And since it's not fully done yet, I didn't want to just completely disregard it. So until it passes, and until we really know what's on the measure, I kind of look at it as a semi-open conversation for us. And then once it closes, but it's not fully done yet. And so wanted to just make sure that you had the opportunity as a group to talk about your priority level for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think with, what in essence a third of Clackamas County in Metro, that it's a conversation piece that we need to be aware of for sure. I think that I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily if it's going to be a letter of support from the C4 as a whole. That'll be a very that could be a very battlefield conversation, I think. So I mean, I guess this is one of those we'll mark it as maybe a lower item to keep an eye on, and as it gets fully baked and we know what the projects are going to be and how they're going to fund it and what that's going to look like, then I suppose we bring it back forward to the group to have a conversation to vet some of those pieces. So Mayor Axelrod and then Commissioner Heisey.
Just briefly, I talked with Lynn Peterson about a little over a week ago about this and some other things. And my sense is that I think consistent with others, right now things still look to be going forward. I think what they're trying to do is reach out regionally and see where their support is. There's a lot of sensitivity around the stacking of pressure on people's property taxes, and I think that's a very legitimate concern, particularly for those new entries into our housing market that are having difficulty and the cost of housing. So that's a very legitimate concern, something to consider and address. But I do think it might be at some point worth seeing if C4 wants to take a position on supporting it or not. I don't know. Sounds like we might be asked that. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, sir, for that. Appreciate it. Commissioner Heisey?
Just a quick note that it is 7:33 and we've made it through 3 topics.
Nope, I'm very aware.
I will also just quickly say that it seems like maybe T2020 is ready to be moved over to C4 Metro at this point. We've gotten a lot of input from the whole body, and C4 Metro is kind of where this lands in a lot of ways.
All right. All right. Seeing no other hands, let's talk about climate action plan. Is that a group discussion, or is that now the county meeting individually with and doing works with each city individually in each jurisdiction? Is this a low priority conversation for this group? Have we talked about this enough? Commissioner Heisey?
Well, I would just encourage us to stay engaged at the C4 level because, who knows when the legislature is going to get around to doing anything. We do have a pretty strong executive order out of the governor's office from this past spring that is taking pretty strong action on a lot of climate issues. So I think the more this body can stay engaged and aware of what's going on, the better poised we will all be to benefit. Because there will be opportunities to have money that comes into your coffers at some point. I don't think they're immediate given the budget crisis that we're facing at the state level. But I, for one, would also really like to stay abreast of what's going on as the county shapes its climate action plan. That work's going to take at least another year. So the more that we know is going on at the county level, the more we have an opportunity to speak up and say, this is something that would help us as cities. This maybe not so much.
Great, thank you. Councilor Morrison.
Yeah, I'll just quickly here agree with Councilor Heisey that I think she makes some really valid points. There's a lot going on, but it's to be on the sidelines to watch, I think. But the other comment that I wanted to make is I'm really interested in the survey that you sent out, Trent. I know our staff is working on it, and it'll be interesting to me to see a compilation of that survey about what the entire region, what Clackamas County is looking for. And then from that point, we could move on.
Thank you for mentioning that. Thank you for mentioning that survey. Yes, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to beg and plead each one and every one of you to have that conversation with your cities. The county absolutely does want to know how the cities want to engage in this and at what levels and who's available and what capacity everybody has. And that feedback is going to help the county make a more robust climate action plan that serves the whole county. And so I do appreciate you taking that to your councils, having those discussions, and then designating a lead who can respond to that survey. And then when that information comes back, I'm hearing at least an interest from Councilor Morrison, but perhaps even the group. If it's relevant and how to engage the cities, this might be an appropriate venue for that discussion.
Okay. I'm sorry, I need to backtrack a moment, and I skipped over the strategic investment fund from the vehicle registration fee. I suspect that that's probably a high priority conversation for this group. That's safe to say? I'm seeing lots of head nods. Okay, there we go. That took all of like 30 seconds. Thank you. Housing, what has changed because of COVID and what is next?
Before we go too far from the strategic investment fund, I just want to make sure it has the context. I do have our transportation team here if you do have any specific questions about it. Obviously, earlier in the year, this group gave our transportation team a lot of direction on how to use those funds coming in. The vehicle registration fees are dependent on vehicle registration, and sales are certainly down this year, even though this is the first year. So I'm not really sure where the projections are on cost and such. So if any of that was baked into the total prices, those numbers might have changed a little bit from those earlier conversations, just because the economy looks different with COVID, and someone mentioned COVID and how that affects things earlier. So, you know, most of the work was going to be planned towards early next year when they started having like a full year and a half of funding in. And so as we get closer to that time period, it might be worth having Mike and his team come back in and provide an update on something like that. But that would be my recommendation moving forward.
I concur. Any additional thoughts on that? All right. Jump back to, so the housing piece was, what does it look like in a COVID-19 world? I don't even know what to say with that regards. It's, I know that anyone want to chime in? Ms. Dunsmore.
I don't know if you guys are having this shock to your city as we are in Estacada, but our permits for housing development actually has not gone down because of COVID. It's actually gone up. We're issuing out more permits to build houses this year than we anticipated. So are you guys experiencing that?
Canby is.
Yeah, so when we talk about housing, I think that the focus still needs to be on multifamily, because I think that that's the greatest impacted demographic when we talk about how COVID affected the housing. I think it affected multifamily more than it affected single family. And then of course, talking about the inequity of income, I see it more happening today than I did even, pre-COVID. So, and now it's starting to affect landlords too. So I think that a lot of our conversation should be surrounding the multifamily and how it affects both sides.
Thank you. Commissioner Heisey and then Commissioner Savas.
I got a promotion. I wanted to say a couple of different things here. One is, COVID has, as Councilor Dunsmuir already pointed out, it's increasing inequity, and it's really pressing renters in particular, and those in multifamily units are really struggling. We have a disparate number of our rental units are actually in single family houses, or so we don't even know what's going on there because we just don't have the same relationships with those one-off landlords. But I think it's probably not going to be good going forward. None of this affects the fact that we just had a Metro bond measure that gave $170 million or so to Clackamas County, and none of this affects the fact that Clackamas County has presumably a whole bunch of projects going to increase the number of affordable units in the county. And I would love to hear an update on how that work is proceeding and what the pace is like. And we already knew that that was only going to cover a fifth of the needs that we had at the time. So since the picture has gotten worse, maybe we need to talk about other tools we could bring to bear on this. We had a committee that met for several years and put together 5 different white papers at the county level. We had a great presentation from that. Councilor Parks from Milwaukee served on that committee. I'm wondering if there are things that they turned up that are in those white papers that we could be doing at the county level that we're not doing, or if there are tools in there that we could be using at the city level. I will say that the construction excise tax is one of those tools that Milwaukee adopted, and that turned out to be really useful for us. We are getting affordable units built as we have multifamily housing going in. We were able to use some construction excise tax dollars to help support small local businesses. So I think that there are things like that, urban renewal districts, there may be other tools out there that it would really be helpful for us to think about and talk about more than ever, now that we know that the need is only increasing and the instability is only increasing.
Thank you. Commissioner Savas, and then Mayor Axelrod.
I just wanted to share that there is money in the system, as Councilor Heisey pointed out, from the housing bond. So that's all in play. Things are moving forward. Those, as we are, moving on projects that are already under construction and also trying to acquire properties and get things underway. Our staff are, they've got their foot on the gas. They're moving and working pretty hard. Can't talk about all the different property potential acquisitions, but we are making progress. I'm pretty confident about that. The bond market right now is kind of attractive, and not in the housing per se, but definitely some of the bids for construction for other projects I know are coming in a little bit lower. So there's opportunity. That said, when someone talked about the economic impacts for families as a result of COVID and the economic recession that we're going to find ourselves, or we are in now, I think that affordability is going to be a big issue. And I think we've got a situation where the need is going to be far greater than we even thought. And I think that if we think that we're going to build a fifth of what we need, I think that's optimistic. I thought that we were going to build probably a tenth of what we need, because I think the need out there was greater pre-COVID, and I think it's even greater than it is today than it was before. But a couple of years ago, for those of you who are around at C4, you probably remember we had a discussion and we asked how many of you support affordable housing and how many of you support housing affordability as themes to support. We want to support more affordable housing or housing affordability. And I think it was pretty well unanimous that everyone thought that the issue really is housing affordability. And we need to talk about that. And it's not about that we don't want affordable housing, but it's a misnomer. And I don't want to get long-winded. We have limited time, but I think we need to bring this back and figure out how we actually build housing that's actually affordable, that kind of matches incomes right now, because a tiny studio apartment for $1,200 is not affordable, especially if you don't have a job.
Thanks, sir. Mayor Axelrod, and then we'll.
Yeah, I generally agree with that, and I want to support the comments from Councilors Heisey and Dunsmuir in terms of the effort moving forward. And I think when we look at a strategy and we look at other options, I think we should closely tie in our transit work and our transit ideas and concepts, because we really need to focus on this corridor development and link and provide the housing in areas where the services are and where, particularly transit is available. So we don't stuff these into distant areas and require cars and further congestion issues.
Okay, thank you.
So I would just add that the retreat was going to talk about the construction excise tax. That was going to be a main topic of conversation for this group this year, and that was back before COVID became incredibly serious. It even lasted a little bit into that. One of the reasons why we knew we were going to cancel the retreat because things were changing, not just with us being able to go back or not go back when we were, back in the spring when we weren't sure, but because COVID changed sort of the economy and the market for how palatable things like the construction excise tax might be. And so timing wise, we were getting direction from even our housing department about, is this the right conversation at the right time? And that's kind of how this particular topic came up. What's changed because of COVID-19, and the palette for something like a construction excise tax might be one of those topics. And so I have it down. I actually have a pretty good list here. I'll just read it so that we have the synopsis because it's the biggest list from the conversation so far. But the rise in permitting, multifamily impacts versus single family impacts, and also the inequity of income and how that affects housing, updates on the Metro funding for housing, and that's 2 bonds. So that could be 2 different types of updates or cover a lot of ground actually. The housing reports that came out of this group, the countywide housing inventory, as well as the other work that happened, the construction excise tax, housing affordability versus affordable housing, and then also tying in transit concepts in the discussion. So pretty robust topics here. I'm hearing a lot of interest.
Great, thank you. Keith, Mayor Swigert.
I have to disagree with Mayor Axelrod. I don't think that affordable housing is a metro problem alone. I think that rural Clackamas County could use some affordable housing also.
Agreed. Great, thank you all, I appreciate that. The 2021 legislative session might be kind of maybe only sort of a hot topic, I think.
So in the past, we've typically, sorry to interrupt you, in the past we've typically had a little bit of time at the November C4 meeting just to think ahead and figure out what this group would like to cover. And then if there's something that this group has more questions about, there's still opportunity in the December or potentially the January meeting. The 21 session will begin right after the day after Martin Luther King Day in January. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but that's when they're starting on the big sessions. And it's a long session, so it's the 6-month run. And just want to give that context. There probably will be, another special session here shortly. It'll focus on state budgets, but those budget issues will continue into the big session as well. So there's some foundation.
Thank you. Councilor Lee, I saw you waving your hand there.
As a member of the County Budget Committee, I'm aware of how much money in our budget comes from state and federal resources. And I think we're already somewhat behind the 8 ball because the agencies have already cut 17% of their budgets up to the end of this biennium. And the governor's office is talking about asking them to identify another 16% that will come up in the next biennium. So I think we really need to start working on that issue sooner than later, if at all possible, especially for our social service programs.
Thank you for that. We all just, I think, wrapped up our budget meetings here in June. I don't know how many of you had to do a lot of cutting, but there's definitely a lot more of a conservative outlook in upcoming years, probably, or at least the next year or so, of what that's going to look like. So I thank you for that, Councilor Lee. I appreciate it. Okay, I chalked that one up being kind of a high piece for us to get ready for in November and December for that session. Thank you. The DLCD House Bill 2001. Trent, you want to give a little background on this item and then we can talk?
Sure. Not too different from the housing conversation that just happened, actually. In fact, I think there's a lot of overlap. But at the last big session, so 2019, House Bill 2001 passed. It had some guidance on multifamily housing within different levels of urban areas, and the rulemaking process is they're kind of in the middle of the rulemaking process for mid-sized cities, and that would include Canby and Sandy right now. They're sort of wrapping up some of their comment period. I think they've actually, maybe DLCD has reached out to those groups, but for the larger urban areas, specifically within the metro growth boundary, there's still opportunities for that. Likely a chance for DLCD to come to either this group or the C4 Metro Subcommittee in the near future, because there's, again, the timing on some of those topics versus what this group wants to cover. So that's a conversation for the executive committee to have. I will note that our county staff was able to do a presentation to our commission this last Tuesday. If you want to go back to the policy session, it's a good 30 to 40-minute conversation on that, and then going to have a follow-up discussion at this upcoming policy sessions on Tuesday for the board if you're wanting more context about the impacts of House Bill 2001. But it's going to have impacts to every city, especially within the Metro UGB, and so this might just be a good conversation for the C4 Metro Subcommittee, but there will be impacts outside of the Metro UGB, specifically for Canby and Sandy, and then within the UGB, the unincorporated area will have impacts too, and so I don't want to disregard those. And so kind of gets into a weird play there about which group could have this update, or maybe C4 Metro can have a more immediate discussion because it'll have feedback opportunities, and then a bigger follow-up as things become more finalized back to this group later. But it will tie into the bigger housing discussion. So there's my context.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, the transit in Clackamas County, transit development plan, and then funding from House Bill 2017. Trying to let you maybe pitch a couple of pieces off of that.
Thanks. So at the June C4 meeting, Karen and her team presented on the county's transit development plan, which is still in process. There's a lot going on with that, but there was a lot of interest from this group to weigh in and understand more about what that means. There's impacts, transit impacts to every community here, both urban and rural. And so I just heard a lot of interest that keep that topic fresh as it evolves. And then for funding from House Bill 2017, that is where most of the funding for transit development and changes and intercoordination is going to be happening. But there are a lot of changes with it. Even most recently at the legislative session, there were some changes into how some of that funding can even be used. So it's an evolving topic where some of that money's come from and how it's used. It's really fresh for a lot of our transit providers. I see that Dwight is here from SMART. He might be able to provide a little more context to that particular topic. But I've heard this just continually be a big topic for C4. How to engage in broader relationships with TriMet. What other new service providing services do we need within Clackamas County? Where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities? If the Metro bond passes this fall, how can that play into increased services? So it just seems like it's a hot topic for this group, and want to make sure that we're listening.
Yeah, transit is definitely a big piece. Everything we talk about, I mean, from housing perspectives to climate action to the widening project, it's a major thread through all of these pieces. So constantly, I think this is one of those that we had a great presentation. Sounds like they've got to go back, make some adjustments, finish off what that plan might look like, and then bring it back to us for any more conversation or changes that we may want to take a look at or discuss. Does that seem like a fair wrap up of that piece, Trent?
I think so.
Okay. Dwight, I'm going to call on you, sir. Do you want to weigh in and comment on this particular one at all?
Well, good evening, everyone. It's been a while. We've been busy. working with the OTA and the small providers of Clackamas County. We meet once a week and have for quite some time. We were supportive of the SB 1601. We made some comments, some testimony. I know TriMet had some misgivings about it, but we understood the importance, at least, I will say some of us understood the importance of having that flexibility. And so for us, the things that maybe didn't smell, all that well, we'll work that out in the rulemaking. But the bottom line was this money will now allow us the flexibility to continue to work together to continue to provide a level of service that I think is going to become even increasingly more necessary as we move forward. Hospital shuttles, non-emergency transportation is going to really become paramount in Clackamas County, especially, I think, in rural areas. And the federal government stepped up with the CARES Act, which benefited all of the small providers of Clackamas County, and those are the providers that I'm most concerned about. And so I think through our regular meetings, we're looking at trying to fill the gaps, work together as almost as one unit, one helping the other to try to improve transit throughout the entirety of Clackamas County. So I think this was a lifesaver. It was a flotation device. We're out there floating around in the vast ocean, and the state just tossed us all a life preserver. And so we are very, very appreciative of that. So I would expect that all of us will be before this committee in the not too distant future talking about some of the plans that we have. And that some of that may include the bus on shoulder and other exciting projects. This is not just about maintaining a current level of service, but we're going to have to rethink the way we do transit, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So anyway, it's good to see you all again, and hope to be working with you closely in the future.
I'm glad to see you, sir. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, there is one angle of this transit that I think it comes up at the retreat every year, and being that this topic tonight is about ideas of how we move forward in the next year and discussions. And so what we've heard at the previous retreats at almost every session is, what are we going to get from TriMet as far as increased coverage? Coverage being providing transit where there is no transit today, or and this transit study that we're doing is identifying those areas. And in discussions with the leadership at TriMet and upper management at TriMet, is becoming painfully clear that the likelihood of getting more coverage in Clackamas County is not so likely. Maybe we can get improvements of service on existing lines, with this measure, for example. But the question is that what if, what if the transit coverage we have today doesn't change, or is not going to change in the next 10 or 20 years? And I know that some of you have talked about, well, what if we expanded one of our existing smaller transit agencies to provide that coverage? And Dwight can probably speak to another revelation, so to speak. It's no surprise. Whenever there's a big bucket of money or a new bucket of money, everyone wants to tap into it. That's why Dwight's smiling right now. So the HB 2017 money that was carved out, the STIF money, the payroll tax that the employee pays, was originally for the last mile, meaning basically where they live to transit, right? So in Clackamas County, that means you need more coverage to make those linkages, but that's not what's happening, and the rulemaking changed that. And even more recently, the legislature is making changes to where they're tapping into that same bucket of money. So now we're seeing that money in jeopardy. And then add COVID to this, and the fact that ridership's falling off, things are looking pretty frightening. And then this whole discussion right now with defunding law enforcement is added another layer of complexity. And again, leadership in TriMet is very concerned about this because they know that there's a direct relationship between lack of confidence or of security on the system and ridership. Meaning if the security goes away, people are not going to ride. So we have a number, it's like the perfect storm right now for transit and the future of transit. So what do we do with it? You know, what do we do if things don't look so good as far as any new coverage? And what's this group want to do if the West Lens and Lake Oswego's and parts of Oregon City and our rural cities don't have very much funds in the way of coverage? What do we do? Dwight, anything you want to add to that?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Savas. I see the issues in Clackamas County as it relates to transit. It's, I've been here 3.5 years, and I appreciate Commissioner Savas. He's been, ringing that alarm at least for that long, and I'm sure beyond my time here. I really think this is not something that we can look to TriMet, and no one should be surprised by me saying this, that we can look to TriMet for a solution. I would suggest that we have small providers, SMART being one. Canby has a transit system. South Clackamas and Malala runs one. We have the Mount Hood Express. We have Sandy. And I think individually, we are not as strong as we could be collectively. And what I'm seeing on a weekly basis is a group of individuals that are passionate about transit, and we're not looking to TriMet to solve this problem for us. We are working together to solve this problem for all of us and for everybody on this particular call. So, for me, it's no longer in TriMet we trust, and it probably hasn't been that way for me since I arrived here. But I've moved on, and I think most of the small providers have moved on. We understand that TriMet plays a key role in the region, in the Tri-County area, but they have not. They've neglected, in my opinion, Clackamas County to a great extent. And you will always hear, well, we're providing more service than the money that we're pulling out of Clackamas County. I don't, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but I think what we're getting is a drop in the bucket compared to what we need. And so I would suggest that the answer to the problem may lie in some type of collective transit system that may not include TriMet leading the way. So just one man's opinion.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Mayor Swigert.
I talked to Mayor Hodgson, I believe it was last year. Of course, then COVID hit, but Malala has a operating rail system that I would like to speak to the owners who are local about running a train of some sorts from Malala to Canby, which would cover points north and south on the rail system. We have a shuttle bus that runs to the college, holds maybe 20 people. When you have thousands in this city commuting to work, that bus really doesn't do much. And it's mainly taking care of college students, because once you hit that bus, you better take it 3 hours early to be able to get to work in Portland. And this is an idea I had. I haven't had a chance to talk to the owners of the rail system yet, going to Canby, but that's one avenue we could look at.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I like that. Mr. Kalani.
I have a question concerning transportation. does anyone know if the bus system is still operating in, it used to pick up people who called in for some assistance going to and from the doctor or to the stores. And since it's been closed, plus the system down there, I think anyway, I haven't seen them. And also, what's going on with the food system that used to take lunches and whatnot once or twice, or maybe 4 or 5 times a week, to people who couldn't get out and do their own shopping or go to a restaurant or anything like that. We've called several times. We used to donate to them when it was operational, but there was nobody answering the phone, so I have no idea what's going on with that. Does anybody else here know?
I can help with that a little bit. Mostly it's going to be me committing to reaching out to our social service department and confirm that those things are either happening or on hold. I know that Meals on Wheels took a small hit and a little bit of a delay, but I don't think that they totally shut down. And there are even some of our own commissioners delivering boxes on different days of the week of food. So that's still happening to some degree. It just might not be at the capacity it was before. And then as for the, I think it's called a ride share or the trip program. I just looked at my desk because my desk number is 1 digit off of that, and I get a lot of calls. I haven't got those calls in a while, and so I'll confirm that, but I do think that there is still some ridership provided for that. But as you know, with COVID-19, they serve the most vulnerable population for COVID-19, and the strongest recommendation for that community is to stay indoors. And so, you know, it's a combination of that service maybe still being available, and also, you know, a need to make sure that those folks also stay safe. But I'll get some clarity on that, and I'll send an update to this group.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. Thank you for that. Mayor Swigert?
We also, oops. Am I still, okay, we also have a group in Molalla. If you get online, it's on Facebook, it's Molalla Cares. It was a group of people that took it upon themselves to deliver food to the people that weren't getting out because of COVID within the city here and all of the outskirts. So if you're looking for somewhere to donate, they're the best. They're doing it all on their own right now.
Great. Thank you, sir. Pretty close to wrapping up here. So administratively, we've got a couple of items there. We've got the equity lens on C4 positions for transportation and land use topics, which I think kind of ties into what Mr. Gronke was asking about and talking about earlier. Future retreat options, and then Mayor Knapp's favorite topic is bylaw adjustments. So is everyone good with bylaws? Are we good? Can we just put that to rest right now? Seeing lots of head nods.
Please, yeah, let's put that to rest, please.
Okay.
I just thought with the 4th of July holiday, I would bring the fireworks with that one.
You have a fireworks slide, Trent, that you can put up?
Just that pun. I just wanted to bring that pun.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right. In terms of future retreat options and then the equity lens, any comments? Those, Trent, are those more just kind of, we're looking to keep the equity lens as a something for us on each of these things as we move forward? Are there specifics that we want to flesh out as a group and how they relate to transit and land use? Or is this just a, you know, as we move forward through these conversations, we need to keep that lens on each of these things that we move through it?
Yes. So I guess my notes here are that, you know, times are a-changing. They're late in changing in some cases, in most cases, with this topic in particular. And so the county is taking a lot of steps to make sure that we are looking at equity and diversity and doing it right and doing it well. So I feel like it's incumbent upon me and my team to make sure that we're helping this committee do it well also. And so if that means adding equity lenses to our conversation and helping the county and this group, you know, focus on every one of our communities who receive these support services, you know, I'm here to provide some support for that. So I'm looking for feedback and direction from this group and how you'd like to approach these conversations. Do you want to simply put lenses on this? Do you want education around equity? You know, education around how this affects transportation and land use. We've actually already had some of the land use component of it when we did the countywide housing needs assessment. One of those reports was on equity, and that was helpful. Very educational, very informative. And so, you know, does this group want to dive into how this can go back to your jurisdictions? You know, it can cover a lot. And so I want to make sure that we're doing careful use of our time, but also not ignoring something that's very significant and changing a lot of our cities and how we meet the needs of our communities.
Thank you, Trent. Anyone want to chime in? Oh, thank you. Councilor Heisey and then Mayor Axelrod.
I would love to hear more about what the county is doing. I think a number of our cities are engaging in this work deeply, have been engaged already in this work deeply, will continue to be engaged deeply. I get a little antsy if we talk about just slapping an equity lens on there, because I think that it's much deeper work than that. So if we're going to start talking about equity in this group for real, let's do it for real. Let's get some education around what it means and how we talk about it, because these are real people, and talking about it carelessly leads to a lot of pain.
Thank you. I agree. Mayor Axelrod.
I couldn't agree with that more. Particularly, Westland has been hit really hard with that, and we are in the process of a very deep dive. And it's a long process, but it's one that all of our communities need to go through. And so, given the resources we all have, it would be nice to, for example, even in our own city, to understand and maybe couple efforts that are going on in the county, so we can, you know, kind of help each other, because I think we need to work together on this very seriously. I was going to say, on the retreat concept idea, I really miss not having a retreat. It's a really nice time to get away and talk about things. And I realized in this COVID, it's a real challenge. I don't know if by the end of the year, there's even a chance we might be able to get together for a day or something, or an overnight. I don't know. But one thing we might consider as a group is to maybe have a focus session later in this year. And I'm kind of thinking around this transit issue and transit brainstorming, and coupled with sort of housing and strategy. I know it's kind of a lot, but I do agree that and with Dwight's comments and with Commissioner Savis's points about getting creative and independent and looking at our own resources and ways to leverage those. I think you're absolutely right on that. And like I have a lot of ideas. I've shared some of those with Dwight and with Mayor Knapp a little bit about leveraging our school district use of buses and somehow combining efforts. And so I think there's a lot of ways to get creative. And so we might consider that a focused retreat maybe on something. If we weren't physically getting together, we could maybe try and get something accomplished on a Zoom call.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And Mayor Knapp, before you speak, I know that we talk. I joke with you about bylaws and whatnot, and I hope you know that I mean that purely in just fun. Along with you and Commissioner Savis, I know that it was an arduous process for our group a couple years back, and I don't think we'd be where we are at as a group if we didn't go through and hash out some of those things. So I hope you know that I mean that, my joking with truly the utmost respect for you and that conversation way back when.
Well, okay. I wanted to talk about the equity piece. You know, I think a lot of our cities have been, trying to figure out how to approach the topic and whatnot. Many of us have not had the direct exposure and history to some of the issues that obviously exist in the society. And one of the things, my staff has been doing is working on what kind of information can be brought to us to sort of work on the context about implicit bias and some of those other things. We have encountered a video presentation that I think that we're going to use here in the city, and it is essentially a 15 or 20-minute history of what obstacles Black people have had in our society and how that has played out. And, you know, you can run through, you know, a couple hundred years of history. The presentation is by one guy, you know, with a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of graphics, you know, explaining everything from, you know, redlining to the Civil Rights Act to, you know, Brown versus Board of Education. I mean, all these different pieces, you know, just sort of in a chronological order. And I do think it's a very powerful piece. I guess the question would be whether C4 would want to dedicate, you know, 20 minutes to watching that collectively and then having a little discussion about it, or at least engaging in something like that, if not that exact one, to sort of raise our collective understanding in some way to facilitate future discussion.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
I can bring that note back to the executive committee. I think we do have a lot of resources at our disposal. The county right now is just hired our chief equity officer, who actually, and coincidentally, was our facilitator at the C4 retreat a couple years ago. You might remember Martine Koblenz, who, and this is another coincidence, helped us through our bylaws discussion. And so she has done a great amount of work with this group already. She may have some ideas for how we can have this conversation moving forward. Other work that's happening in Clackamas County right now is we are just launching into some work with the Community of Colors Coalition. They are doing a deep dive into inequity that's existed here in the county and looking for ways and gaps that the county can re-engage communities of color and help us focus our equity work in all of our departments so that we're not leaving anybody out. And so that's another area for when that report and that information comes back out and new directions coming out of the county, that can come back to C4 as well. That might even be the topic of our, you know, breakout day retreat that Mayor Axelrod was describing. So I think there are some options in the near term. I do like the idea that Mayor Knapp is offering, you know, some short videos that can kind of help guide some discussion if they can be watched in advance. So these are definitely topics we can take back to the executive committee and make sure that they're heard and we come up with a plan for how this group wants to move forward with it. I am hearing an interest in this group talking more about equity. So for the purposes of tonight, you know, I'm hearing that interest and it's a high priority. That's what I have down in my notes today. And then I have Mayor Axelrod and Commissioner Savas is next with their hands up.
Well, just briefly following up on this topic, not only with what happened in West Lynn, but with the George Floyd and developments around the country, you know, many of us have all been doing, certainly I have been doing a deeper dive into understanding systemic and institutional racism in our country. And I thought I knew or kind of understood it a little bit. And I've come to learn so much about my own privilege, and it's really been eye-opening for me and remarkable. And I just want for a little homework assignment for everyone, because there's just a lot of good resources out there. If you haven't seen the documentary 13, definitely watch it. Definitely watch it. It's very eye-opening in establishing kind of a framework underlying all our civic and community framework that has driven so much of the problems we have that we see today. And it's just, I encourage everyone to watch it. And I love the idea of getting together and watching things and talking about it. It's a great way to hear from each other and address this core elements of what's very important for all the work we do, underlying the work we do. So thank you all for that.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, getting back to when this topic was first broached, I just want to let everyone know that I am not interested in just token ship policies and punch in the box, if you will. And I think we have some meaningful work that needs to be done. And the resolution that the county passed condemning violence and racism, one thing that actually fits perfectly with C4 is something that is in the last paragraph of our resolution, and that's really talking about displacement as a result of land use and transportation policies. People's wealth or not, or their financial despair or their poverty has a lot to do with their ability, their rents or their home situation. Do they own homes and home ownership? And if you look at what's been done with quite a few of the policies that are put in play today, transportation policies and housing that are mixed together, is that you end up with fewer parcels and opportunities of home ownership than you would have otherwise. You end up with more expensive properties than you would have otherwise. And there's some great articles coming out right now because of the George Floyd incident. And I've been trying to ring this bell for several years, and I think I'm getting some more traction now. And I will tell you that our commission, at least three of us, are going to be pushing hard on this. And I plan on raising this also with on the T2020 discussion, because that might be a recipe for disaster. If you actually look at those policies in the sense that just doing affordable housing actually exacerbates the problem. You need to have home ownership opportunities. You need to have housing that's affordable, not affordable housing per se. So I just want to point that out, that fits with C4, because transportation and land use is key. So I would love to get a presenter or two to come talk to us about land use policies and transportation policies, displacement, anti-displacement policies, and the historic impacts. And it's not just people of color, it's low income. And again, disproportionate share of low income people are people of color. So, they're interchangeable to some degree. But I would love to have that conversation and really move towards looking at ourselves and looking inside, looking at what we do and pointing to what we think we're building and doing that's actually affordable and provides home ownership opportunities.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Heisey?
We haven't adopted it yet, but that's exactly what our comprehensive plan work for years has been building toward, is how do we crack that problem open and create housing affordability and home ownership opportunities that are more accessible for those of us who don't make hundreds of $1,000s a year. I actually did want to say that I had one wacky idea to potentially add to the list, but I don't need to do it now. I think we're still continuing on the conversation. So I just wanted to give a heads up about that.
We will come back to that before we close out, okay? Mayor Knapp.
Yeah, it's a good discussion. One of the things that I think we have made the most progress on in Wilsonville over the last 10 years, I've been mayor essentially 12 years, is developing some expertise internally to put together a task force of people from diverse backgrounds and perspectives on frequently contentious issues and try to move that process forward to some kind of a consensus that we can use as policy making. The initial component in each of those task force processes that have yielded success is bringing everybody up to a kind of a common level of knowledge and understanding. And my experience is you cannot develop that consensus if everybody is working from a different set of assumptions, a different level of knowledge, a different perception of the world around them. And so that educational piece to help bring everybody forward to a point where you've got enough understanding that you can then move into informed discussion and consensus building is just absolutely critical in my experience. So on this topic, I think that if we do intend to try to do something more than just superficial, that it's important that we have some kind of a process that everyone can participate in to do some common level of understanding and fill in the gaps in my background and someone else's background so that we can arrive at a point that we're really ready to then start talking about it. And failure to do that is frequently a big factor when our joint work has not succeeded in moving forward. So just in terms of approach, I would encourage us in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone in this conversation. I really do. I think there's some great pieces here in this latter part that we need to definitely figure out how to pull together and do it in a way that makes it impactful and creates that thing that ties it all together for everything that we do going forward. So I really appreciate that. Before I move into the other business and updates, to Councilor Heisey's point about, is there anything that's not on the list that we should put on there, or other conversation topics to put in queue here for filler, or if we ever have such a thing? So I will let Councilor Heisey start us off on that dialogue.
Yeah, I don't really see an opportunity for us to need filler, but I'm going to put this out there anyway, that all of our small businesses are hurting. All of our local economies are being crushed right now. I don't think there's ever been a joint meeting with the Economic Development Commission at the county level with this body, but that could be really interesting. And I think that there's a really interesting intersection with their work and the TDP, honestly. So maybe that's something we could think about.
I like that idea. Thank you for sharing that. Mayor Knapp.
We had a session not too far back about emergency access routes and those routes in the county that might play into that. And there was a realization that some of us had that we've had perhaps less involvement in that discussion than some of the other counties, and our municipalities have not been maybe as involved. So that seems to me like something that might be worth using as a smaller topic at some point.
Thank you, sir. All right, I'm going to close out this portion and we'll go into, again, thank you all for the dialogue here. I think that we've got a lot here to keep us busy over the next probably 3 years. So updates and other business, JPAC and MPAC updates. Has there been any meetings on both of those at all? Miss Councilor Koloff.
So Impact is going to have, I think, 4 or 5 meetings going forward. Most definitely there's pressure to downsize the impact of Impact. We'll see. But the next meeting coming up, we'll start with a half hour of those who are the chair, the first co-chair, and then I'm the second co-chair. I'm pushing hard to get us back where we have our meetings twice a month and we begin a real exchange back and forth from Metro and us and vice versa. But it's going to take some pushing.
Okay, thank you. Anything from JPAC at all?
Mayor Knapp, probably say the same thing I did. I think if you want to add something, Mayor, the JPAC meeting was canceled for this month. I'm not really sure why, but nothing to report.
Okay. Tim's nodding affirmatively. All right. R1 Act update. See, Councilor Koloff and Commissioner Sabas, myself. Trying to see who else is here that is part of that group.
It was canceled too.
Well, we did have we had our R1 Act. I think we meet about every other month approximately. And I think the hope was that we would have the next meeting live in Cascade Locks. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're headed towards another Zoom kind of meeting, a virtual meeting. So more to come. I don't know when that date is, but I know it's probably going to be August.
Yeah. All right. So not much on those. Any other business for the evening? Okay. Before I sign off, Trent, can you and I chat before you disconnect?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, everyone, thank you. It's 8:31. I appreciate all the dialogue today. I think we've got a lot to put together here, and Trent's going to be busy tabulating all this and getting it together for us into hopefully worthwhile chunks to start working through. So I wish you all a very safe and happy 4th of July and Independence Day. Wear your masks, stay with family, make sure that at the end of the evening you have 10 fingers and 10 toes. If you know of anywhere there's going to be a fireworks display, please share and let everyone know. Head east. Okay. Mayor Swigert knows what's going on, so we're going to head out his way. Everyone, thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it. Have a great holiday weekend, and see everyone soon.
Thank you, everyone.